about the human body. It is so complex because if you can just see from the skeleton diagram right here, we have over 200 bones in the body. Then you have fat and muscle on top of the bones. You have things like clothes that get in the way, so it's really hard to break down the human body. But I'm going to be showing you a few tips that can help you do this. So let's take a look at this anatomy drawing of the human skeleton. And I don't expect you to memorize all these different bones. That would be insane to ask you to do that. But I do want to highlight, literally, a couple of areas for you guys that you're going to want to focus on when we are trying to attack these drawings that we're going to be doing today. You want to focus on the head or the skull area, the neck. I kind of just connect both of those, the head and the neck. You're going to want to pay attention to this bone, the collarbone, which goes across your neck and connects to your shoulders. Of course, your arms, which you actually have two bones in your arms. It always drives me crazy when people do little scarecrow figures because there's actually two bones here. You have the humerus as the top bone, and you have the radius and the ulna that actually rotate around each other here. Of course, you have hands. You have a big backbone, or your spine is what a lot of people just say. You have your pelvic bone or your hip bone area. You have your legs, and just like your arms, it's broken up into two parts. You have your femur bone, which is a crazy long bone in the body, and at the bottom of your tibia and your fibula, and of course, your feet. As you can see, oh, and the rib cage. Okay, so it looks like everything. It pretty much is everything. But we're not getting into all these little specific things, the thoracic vertebrae, the lumbar vertebra. I don't know what any of those things are. But those basic shapes that I just highlighted is what we're going to really focus on today. And the way that you start to attack a figure drawing, that's what it's called when you do a human, is a figure drawing, is you start with a gesture drawing. A gesture drawing is a really loose, sketchy drawing that allows you to go back and fix things and allows you to be able to make mistakes. So I always follow this kind of 8-step process of how to draw the human body. So the first thing that you always want to figure out is the backbone. And the backbone of the human body is usually shaped with some type of curvature. If someone was standing straight up and down, they wouldn't be able to move. So you want to first determine that with just a really simple line. Sometimes it might be curved like an S. If the human is in a sitting position, it would be more like a C. So you just have to pay attention to the figure in front of you. Your collarbone, which would be a line between the shoulders, like so. Then you want to do your rib cage, which actually connects to the collarbone, and you want to use a really large upside down triangle. And then your pelvic bone or hip bone, which is a little bit smaller than your hips. Now, if we're talking about male and female, females tend to have a more equal rib cage and pelvic bone. Males tend to have a larger rib cage and a smaller pelvic bone. But you're also going to do an upside down triangle for that. Then your legs. Make sure you make your legs long enough. The femur bone, when we look back at the skeleton, is a very long bone in the body. And we might as well take a second to talk about proportions real fast. When we're talking about the human body, the hips and the legs take up more than half of the body, really just the legs, and part of the hip bone up to the cranium take up the other half. So no matter if you're drawing a short or a tall person, you have to make sure that you're drawing their legs enough. Another thing to check for when we're going to talk a little bit more about measuring, but in the human body, there are 7.5 to some people argue 8 heads in the body. So if I were to measure this skull, I should be able to count it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a little, so 7.5. So this is a appropriately proportioned skeleton. All right, so back to our gesture drawing. So with the legs, make sure that you draw the femur bone nice and long. It should be close to the top of that triangle that you do. And the bottom of your legs, of course, because remember there's 2 sections. Back up to your arms. Your arms should be connecting to that collarbone. And again, you have 2 lines for that. And then your head, I usually draw 2 ovals to show some dimension. If you just want to draw 1 oval, that's totally fine. And your hands and your feet, which we'll just keep as ellipses for right now, or ovals is another way of determining it. So that is the way that we want to start these drawings. The next step when you are doing a gesture drawing is to add mass. And when you're adding mass, that is what we call fat and muscle. So you still have to start with this very basic drawing of the human anatomy in the most basic form. And what you're going to do is you're going to add ellipses or ovals, skinny ovals, to the arms and legs. So of course you have to look at your picture, look at your model of who you're doing. So I'm going to add some skinny ovals. I also like to put circles where there are joints because that just helps me to know that that's a connection point. Now I know that the leg is a little bit wider at the top and skinnier near the knee. So I'm going to kind of shape my oval like that. Okay, so now that I've added ellipses, what you're going to do, I'm going to get a different color so you guys can see, is you would kind of trace around those ellipses to get a really good basic shape. So I would hug tight, almost as if there was like a magnet to these lines. And I know that a shoulder's not that pointy right there, so I'm going to go around like this. And you might realize when you're drawing that one of your lines doesn't make sense. You can always shave a line short, like I'm about to do right here. Again, I know that even though I drew a triangle for the hip, no one's hip juts out like this and comes back. And now I have a basic human drawing. It has mass, it has the right proportions, and we're ready to go. So we're going to follow these 2 steps right here, and you guys are going to be doing a variety of positions. I want you to do 2 things in your drawings. I want you to first do the line drawing, of how to do this gesture drawing, and then I want you to add mass to your figure too. If you want to go further with it and you want to add clothes and you want to add a face, you can, but please remember that this week is all about just kind of getting used to these things, and drawing the human form is really hard, so as long as you guys have a base like this and you can know how to break down the form, that's what's really important to me. We'll leave this out to refer to. So I would like you guys to do a few different poses. I'd like you to, of course, do just a normal standing pose. So I looked for pictures on the internet, and of my queen, I have Beyonce, so I have a standing pose. I recommend looking up a side pose. This is from Black is King. Some sort of an in-motion pose. This could be someone dancing. This could be someone jumping. This could be a sports athlete. Olympic athletes are really great to look at for this, but this is just kind of like a dancey picture. And I also recommend a sitting picture. So if you've been counting along, I'd like you to draw 4 different human gesture drawings that have the skeleton and have the mask, just so you can kind of get a little bit used to it. So what you're going to need for this is a pencil. That is pretty much all you need. And you're going to need a piece of your copy, a full sheet, so you guys can see it a little bit better. What you should do is you should have your picture that you're referencing up on your computer, and you should have your paper next to you. You can watch this video first and then do it, or you can kind of watch along to it and have 2 screens open or 2 windows open. For this, I'm also going to use a black marker just so you guys can see it a little bit easier. It's sort of hard to see the pencil. I'm also going to help you guys out by showing you a video of how to annotate over a photo, which is similar to what I'm going to do right now. Because if you are kind of having trouble breaking down the body and you're not understanding what I'm saying, I'm going to show you how to do that on a Google Drawing. So, let's break down this body into a similar gesture like this. So, when we're starting with the backbone, we can see that Beyonce's backbone is pretty straight, like this. And I'm going to do the collarbone next, which, again, because you're starting with just a standing position, it goes straight across. She has a rib cage, goes to about here. It's usually the skinniest point of the torso, and if you don't know what torso means, that's like this part of your body here. We have the pelvic bone. It's easy right now because she has her hands on her hips. And we have the legs, and you can see the leg connects really high on that triangle. Now, this one I kind of have to guess at, and this front leg is in front of the back leg because of the way she's standing, so it might look a little funny. And there's a little bit of guesswork here. So these 2 circles, again, are kind of to show the face and to show the cranium, which is like where your brain is kept. So I kind of have a good basic drawing here. Now I'm going to try and copy this drawing onto my white paper. And again, I'm just going to follow those steps. The backbone is pretty straight in this picture. Look at how loose I'm staying with my marker. You guys will be using pencil. So something you should do, a little tip for you guys, is called angling. Angling is when you take your pencil, you take whatever tool you're using, and you try and figure out what the angles are so that you can accurately portray them in your drawing. So I have this, go over here. Okay, so now before adding mass is where I'd want to make sure that my body matches up, but I'd also want to check proportions right now. So I want to make sure that her body is split in the right direction. It's not too big, it's not too small. Make sure that I don't have too small of a head on there. And then her foot's a little bit longer because she's sticking it out. So this actually is about 8 heads in my drawing. So then I'm going to go on to adding the mass that we talked about. So this is really where it's important to look at your reference photo, because if you're doing a big, bulky football player, they're going to have a lot more mass. If you're doing a slender ballerina, you're going to have to draw much, much skinnier ovals or much skinnier ellipses. Beyonce's kind of known for her hourglass figure, so I want to make sure that I put hips on her. Okay, so I've added my ellipses. Now I want to go back and I want to do my nice outline that sort of describes the figure really well. Now when you're doing this outline, don't forget you can always get rid of the prior information. So I'll use red so you guys can see it a little bit better actually. So if I notice that something is not right that I've done, I can just kind of cut corners. But again, you should be referencing the picture that you're looking at. So I'm going right over some of my prior lines and noticing that I've made some mistakes, so I'm just fixing them. And since this is blank right here, we didn't add any ellipses here, I need to look over and see Beyonce's shape right here so that I can get the right shape going. And again, remember, some of this is guesswork because you're trying to get the body. You can always go back and do the clothes later. Another good tip that you guys can do is I call it air tracing, and I've actually seen some of you guys do this already, but air tracing is when you take your pencil and you kind of try and make your hand remember muscle memory, trying to go over a line. So So that is a pretty good basic drawing. If you wanted to take it a step further, you could start to, again, reference your picture, and you could draw the clothes of whoever you're drawing. But before you draw the clothes, make sure that everything sort of makes sense with what you've done. So I can just kind of start to sketch out her gown here, her sleeves, and that sort of thing. And just I would get, the more detail I get, the more I could erase some of this underneath things. So that is a standing pose. Next, you're going to do a sideways pose. And sideways poses are a little bit tricky because the triangles that you figure out are slanted. So this is a video that has very intense choreography. What you guys can see here is when you're trying to find those basic things, again, you can do this through air tracing, you could do this on a Google drawing. We don't want you tracing this on your Chromebook, that would be cheating. We want you to develop your skills. So here, the collarbone is way tilted, what you can see here. And we are no longer dealing with a perfect triangle. The triangle's kind of this way. What is the correct geometry term? It's not equilateral anymore. Same thing with the hip. The hip goes all the way here, down. So that is an extreme slant, and you can tell that it's so slanted because the legs are in such different positions. They are actually, one is crossing behind the other. The feet are even different directions. So that's kind of the gesture I want to go for. The basic gesture. So just like my last drawing, I'm going to start the same way. I like to start with the collarbone. I just always like to see what type of angle that's going to be. So again, use your angling. Stay really sketchy because you're probably going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Another thing you can always use angling for too is between 2 points. So if I want to check and make sure that her knees align to each other, I can, if I know the angle is from here to here on my paper, I can actually draw that angle. So where her knee should be here, this is where her knee should be when it intersects this line. Same thing, I can angle from here to where her hand is, or her wrist is, I should say, and I can make sure that that matches up with my drawing. So by doing that, I actually just realized that I made the arm too short. So I'm going to just fix that right now. So it's always important to double check your work and use these artist resources. Another important thing for you guys to realize is this arm is in front of this arm, or I should say this arm is closer to the viewer and this arm is further away, so her arms are not going to look equal in this picture. You want to draw what you see, not what you know. You know that 2 arms are exactly the same, but they are not in the view that we are seeing of Beyonce. Or whoever you're drawing right now. You don't have to be drawing Beyonce, obviously. Football player, whatever. Alright, so now is that time where we're going to be adding mass. Okay, and again, the last step is to figure out your outline. So using your mass lines and using your basic lines, and of course using your reference picture, you're going to try and replicate at least the outline of what you see here. Okay, and that is, again, how you do a basic outline. Now, again, is the point where I could go in and add some clothes and stuff. I actually have some corrections to make on mine a little bit. Just exactly where things make sense and where hips are and things like that, because it's kind of a difficult view. But overall, you can see that I've started to make the shape. And this is, again, all we're expecting you guys to do when you're doing these 4 sketches is we want it to be sketchy like this. We want to be able to see the outline and you trying to add mass to your figure. Oh, I see what I did wrong now. Okay, see, I'm an art teacher and I made mistakes. Okay, next one is going to be an action shot. I recommend like an action shot from the front, just because I do think it's easier to draw from the front. So this time I'm not going to outline what I see, just so you guys can see how you do it without outlining it. But I am still going to really heavily rely on my air tracing, my measuring, my angling, so I can kind of see that Beyonce's spine is kind of curved this way and then this way. Her collarbone is at a really sharp angle. very tall in this picture. I might not have enough room. This leg is much more at an angle than this leg. It's kind of tricky when arms are crossed because you have to pay attention to which part of the arm is going down, which part of the arm is going up, and that there's actually a little bit of an overlap. I'm actually making corrections as I go. Okay, so just like the other sketches, I'm going to add some math. Then once I've added math, that's when I can work on the outline. And I notice her shoulder goes really close to her mouth. We know her shoulder isn't connected to her mouth, but that's the way the pose is. So you kind of get the idea there. A little bit more action. And then in the last picture that we want you guys to do is we want you to do some sort of a sitting figure. And when they are sitting, whoever you're looking at, their spine is much more condensed. You guys can even tell it in yourselves. When you stand, your spine, the little vertebrae kind of stretch out. When you're sitting, they get crunched together. And you kind of are more in a C motion instead of an S motion. So just so you guys can see it, her spine only goes from there. When in other pictures, you saw how long the spine was. So you just kind of have to account for that the triangle for the rib cage and the triangle for the pelvic bone are going to be a little bit closer together on this one. So again, I'm going to try and just go without tracing it over here so you guys can see how to use the different techniques. See how much closer I have the two triangles in that standing pose. I have quite a bit of space between here. I have much less space now that she's sitting. This leg is going to look super short, and this leg is going to look super long since she has it extended. So I'm going to definitely make sure I do angling on this. And I can even angle between the two knees to make sure I get the right angle between the 2 feet. Just like before, I'm going to add my mask. Now, this picture's taken a little bit from below, so her legs are going to look a lot bigger than the top of her body. So you just got to pay attention to your photograph. Kind of looks almost like a funhouse type picture. Alright, so now it is your turn. Again, we want you guys to be doing your basic shapes adding your mass and then smoothing out the figure. You can go further if you'd like to get more complex, but when you're turning your work, at the end of this module, we are looking for these sort of sketches. We want you to do a standing pose, a side pose, a movement pose, so a body in motion, and a sitting pose. Those 4 poses are what we're going to be looking for. Good luck.